Sony Honda Mobility, aka AFEELA. It's been quiet from them. You know, Honda's been much more vocal about their EVs, their technology, batteries, all that stuff. I went to Japan to preview for you guys the upcoming 0 Series EV from Honda, which will be on the same platform as this AFEELA sedan. Now, we haven't really heard much, at least in the traditional sense of an automaker. We haven't heard much about models. We haven't heard much about specs, anything like that. Instead, most of what we've been hearing about is team-ups with other companies, with Stingray. So you can do karaoke in your EV. You can do other things as well. You have this ride view, in-car entertainment. That's what Sony and Honda are banking on here with their AFEELA cars, to provide a sort of streaming service and functionality, I guess, that you cannot get in any other car. In theory, all right? They're very, very aggressive. You can even do Zoom meetings in your Sony Honda Mobility vehicle. You'll be able to download different themes and play even video games with this vehicle. When I sat in this AFEELA concept at the Japan Mobility Show last year, David and I were very, very impressed. David from Automotive Press. We couldn't believe how polished and how upscale the vehicle felt. Now, we're both not huge fans of screens everywhere, and that's something that, well, they're banking on, Sony and Honda. I mean, also teaming up with Oteru for advertisement possibilities, for application integration, streaming services like Tune goggles. It's going to be a bit overwhelming in my opinion, but we should learn a lot more. So here's the thing. Sony Honda Mobility will have a booth at this year's CES, and that is where in the past they've revealed the official vehicle for AFEELA. And we'll talk more about that today, about their products. I will be at CES for the first time ever with Honda. Hopefully Honda gives me a little bit of flexibility to tour some other booths, because even though like Sony Honda Mobility is not the same company as Honda and their EVs, Sony Honda Mobility, they are 100% using Honda's EV architecture. This will be built in Ohio. AFEELA models, they will be built in Ohio and then exported throughout the world. All right. So hopefully I get a chance to sneak on over to the Sony Honda Mobility booth to see what they have in store for us. Speaking of Sony and Honda Mobility, on my second channel, Kreifel Cycles, I do an unboxing. That video just went live today. I do an unboxing of Honda's new Moto Compacto. It's new for me. It's been out for about a year. This little e-scooter, I'll pull up some images for you guys, is a throwback to the Moto Compo scooter that was popped out of the back area of a Honda City. Now, we didn't get the Honda City hatchback in America, but guys, go ahead and check this out on my new channel. Make sure you subscribe to my new channel for the unboxing, first ride impressions, coming down the hatch, as well as range test, all that. A lot of fun stuff with the Honda Moto Compacto. So let's get back to Sony Honda Mobility. So let's talk about what's going on at this year's CES for Sony Honda Mobility. If you guys are excited, make sure to hit that like button and make sure you subscribe, because I will be updating you whether I can attend this booth or not. I will be updating you on what's going on once we get official information from AFEELA. And I will get into this press release, don't worry, but Honda also will be revealing a new BEV SUV, maybe two of them, at this year's CES, and I will bring that for you guys, so stay tuned for that. All right, Sony Honda Mobility will make a presentation at the Sony Group press conference. So there you go. It will be held at the Sony press conference, not the Honda press conference, on January 6th. In addition, on January 7th, Sony Honda Mobility will hold its first solo press conference to present further details. Okay, so they have two press conferences. They'll get a shout out during the Sony press conference, and then Sony Honda Mobility will have their own press conference the next day on January 7th. The brand AFEELA, which aims to redefine the relationship between people and mobility, is scheduled to launch its first mass-produced EV model in 2025, with deliveries expected to start in 2026. All right, so at the EV hub that they're working on in Ohio, Honda is boiling down their two manufacturing lines, assembly lines, to just one. And currently on that manufacturing line, we have the Honda Accord, we have the Acura TLX and Acura Integra. But we're going to see more models being blended into this new mega line, this hyper flexible mega line in Ohio, from AFEELA to Acura to Honda to EVs to hybrids to gas models. It's going to be interesting. And I will be touring this new plant late January. All right, or should I say this revised plant, to see how Honda is going to be able to juggle this super flexible assembly line. So stay tuned for that. I'll bring you hands-on coverage in Ohio with this new assembly line. Okay, so what will they show there? Well, the booth is going to showcase the latest model that has been updated towards its product launch. Well, we only know of one model. That's the really smooth-looking sedan. Now, they want to have SUVs as well. Before Sony teamed up with Honda, Sony already had a few concepts for sedan and even crossovers. You bet. I don't know if the SUV will be teased or announced at this year's CES, but we should have a more concrete production model of the sedan. Now, when I spent time with the sedan, sat in it, walked around it, it looked production ready, almost too perfect. The vehicle literally seemed perfect, super high quality in terms of the build department and materials. So hopefully what we see here at CES is not a radical transformation of the sedan, because I like the sedan the way it is. Through the vehicles on display and various visual contents. Okay, vehicles. Does that mean there's going to be more than one sedan, or are they going to have a sedan and a crossover? To me, this sounds like it's going to be a sedan and a crossover. So we might get a new vehicle announcement. And so those will be on display, as well as various visual contents, latest initiatives, and specifics on AFEELA's concept of autonomy, augmentation, which is a Honda slogan as well with their EVs, and affinity. Those concepts will be introduced and expounded upon. Now, both conferences will be available for live streaming. So if I'm not able to, and they have links here. So if I'm not able to be there to give you guys hands-on coverage, which fingers crossed I will be able to, we'll see. Hopefully I can give you guys a wrap up with the online live stream. Okay, so what else is going on with Honda and Sony? This is a report back in February. So this is almost a year old at this point. But the plan, at least from sources, is to roll out 3 EVs before 2030. Okay, well, we know we have the sedan. There's going to be a crossover. There's probably going to be a smaller crossover. What is Honda doing with their EVs? I think they can't be too unique, I would say, apart from Honda, right? Because it is on Honda's 0 Series platform. If we look at Honda's timeline, well, Honda's going to have a whole bunch of EVs before 2030. But if we look at what's launching first, is this going to be AFEELA too? Are they going to launch the sedan, which is going to be their version of the saloon with more streaming functionality in theory? For sure, a mid-size SUV, because that's the best-selling segment in theory. Now, the next SUV from Sony Honda Mobility, is it going to be an entry level, or is it going to be a large? Time will tell. Or is it going to be a compact, right? Well, that's also... What's interesting is that the midsize will be slightly larger than the compact. Entry level is probably a subcompact, so maybe something like an HRV sized should be coming from Honda. And these are just Honda 0 Series models. This is not including, on this timeline here, it's not including Acura, and it's not including AFEELA. They're saying that the SUV will be out in 2027, a year after the sedan, and a compact sometime in 2028. Well, if we go back to this, well, maybe it'll launch alongside of the Honda compact SUV. So it looks like they'll be doing a sedan and a midsize, skipping these two, and going to the compact SUV in 2028, with the midsize SUV landing in 2027 for AFEELA. Now, as we step back and look at the company with, I guess, a somewhat political lens, how is Honda and Sony going to pull off 3 electrified or heavy electrified lineups within the Sony Honda AFEELA brand, the Honda brand, and the Acura brand and make a case for all of those EVs. We're already seeing a very slow growth with EVs. Tesla has had many months of shrinking sales volume here in the United States. They still have a huge part of the market, about half the market, but it seems like their market share, well, not seems, their market share is shrinking. Legacy auto EV market share is growing, but total EV adoption is still very slow here in the United States. How will Sony and Honda and Honda's EVs in general be able to get their own fair share? And will they be able to move the needle to increase the desirability of EVs? Only time will tell. But this is an article I haven't got to yet. It's been in my back pocket, been waiting for the right opportunity. So let's bring this up. Let's talk about Honda and Sony preparing for a tough debut. The good news is the hardware, the car itself is complete. All right, the only thing left is software. Software is by far the most difficult thing. However, these cars will be software updatable over the air. And then according to Takaki Nakanishi, chief analyst of Tokyo-based auto consultancy Nakanishi Research Institute, they claim that the novice EV maker, you could say, I mean, Honda, yes, in terms of battery electric, is still pretty green, but they've been working with hybrids for a couple decades now, and those are technically electrified vehicles. But in terms of BEVs on a new platform, it's brand new. And novice, meaning Sony Honda Mobility, specifically here, they will be entering the already competitive American market at the worst timing. Why is this the worst timing? Well, Trump's about ready to throw out the EV tax credit, $7,500, no longer being able to be put on the hood of these vehicles through a lease or a purchase. Canceling the current credits could cause EV sales to drop nearly 30% as these vehicles launch from that Ohio plant. And if the EV tax credit is gone, you know, Honda doesn't have to produce tons of these EVs and lose money on these EVs. Remember, this line is flexible. Would they prefer to build EVs? Probably at this point. But you got to keep in mind that if the market is demanding hybrids, Honda has a new generation of hybrid coming out in 2026. The market's demanding that a flexible assembly line in Ohio should be able to cater to that and keep BEV volume fairly low if the demand isn't there. That's all in theory, but economies of scale are a thing. So if you really need to make a lot of EVs to make them cost effective, and the market isn't soaking that up, and you have to incentivize them post-production, then it could get tricky. Kawanishi-san is the head of Sony Honda Mobility. He's made PlayStations. He's made the robotic dog, the Aibo. He says all businesses have ups and downs. We won't live and die by it. But if we think about the environment, EVs will spread, and sooner or later, that's the way the world will go. Honda, for Japanese companies, very aggressive with EV adoption. Now, their current sales model doesn't say that. You know, they have one EV, the Prologue, which isn't even built by Honda. It's built in Mexico by General Motors. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about the ZDX, which is also built by General Motors. Honda wants to be fully battery electric by 2040. So that's just, 15 years from now. And they are trying to get ahead of the curve. Now, when I was in Japan, seeing the technologies Honda has with their welding technologies, their mega casting, they're going to have really competitive EVs. Now, it all comes down to price, but you know, I think they will be able to be price competitive. But if the market's just not eating up those EVs in the near term, they might be bleeding money. Now, this is what's interesting. Michael Dunn, CEO of US-based consultancy Dunn Insights, says about AFEELA and EVs in general, I don't think it's going to win or lose based on car attributes, meaning range. I've heard 275 miles of range on this EV sedan, which is not great. It's kind of okay, if not a little bit disappointing. All right, but the official range hasn't been announced yet. They're saying that the EV is going to win or lose based on its software. And that could be true, especially with the AFEELA. What other cars are doing karaoke? There might be some out there, but to have 100,000 karaoke songs on demand in your AFEELA is pretty cool. Is that going to move the needle? No, but it's all those small software additions, working with all these different companies that are going to potentially present a package that will give AFEELA the nod. Now, will Honda get those sort of integrations? It's hard to say. You would think so, but only time will tell. How I feel about AFEELA is that they might not last long term. But I could see Sony contributing to Honda's EVs and maybe even hybrids with their camera technology, their software technology from here going forward, whether or not Sony Honda Mobility has long life. If you look at someone like Rivian or Lucid, who are on it on their own, yes, they have investments from some big companies, the Saudis or Amazon, for example, they're still losing money per car sold. Like AFEELA has this huge benefit from having an existing company to kind of be a subsidiary of. These EVs will be Honda EVs, just with a unique flavor of style and functionality with software, and potentially unique autonomous driving, which I think Honda would want that on their models for sure. But unlike a lot of those EV startups, you have Honda to hedge your bets on, and Sony Honda Mobility, it's not that big of a risk. In fact, for Honda, it's a potential winner. And for Sony, it's a potential winner, right? Because Sony's entering a market that they've traditionally had no business being in, other than maybe some Sony audio systems in cars. But now we have a PlayStation on wheels with the help of Honda. I think it's really, really exciting. And they have a lot to gain from a potential success with AFEELA, and not a lot to lose. Honestly, yes, they would lose money, but the amount of experience and potential gains that both of these companies can get out of this partnership outweigh the potential bankruptcy that could happen. They've already poured a total of $333 million into this joint venture, which for a BEV startup, that doesn't sound like that much. Now, Sony has a goal of expanding its auto sensors business by serving more automakers. That is absolutely genius. It doesn't seem like Honda, maybe Honda invests into Sony, or maybe Honda and Sony going forward don't make cars together, which we don't know the long-term success of AFEELA. They haven't even launched. But instead, Sony Honda Mobility becomes an autonomous driving software integration that can be licensed from other companies. Again, this partnership has so many benefits outside of the individual cars themselves. This number is just kind of thrown around here, 30 to 40,000 annual sales for AFEELA. You got to keep in mind there's going to be a lot of these AFEELAs also exported to other markets, Japan, Europe, etc. I guess I'll learn more about potential production volume when I tour this BEV plant in Ohio late next month. Experts say Sony Honda Mobility would have a good chance of selling around $50,000, not far above the average new price in the US. But with no EV tax credit, would it have a chance around $50,000? Here's a good market share wheel or pie chart for Tesla having half the market here in the United States. You know, Hyundai and Kia have the same architecture, kind of like a Sony Honda will have the same architecture. So that is they make up about 9% of the market, which is second to Tesla. And Kia and Hyundai's eGMP architecture is the best EV architecture I've tested, from the software to the overall driving dynamics, the range, the charging. Honda and Kia have a great EV ecosystem. Tesla does too. Obviously, look at their success. But the other manufacturers are catching up to Tesla, and Tesla will no longer have this monopoly of their charging systems. The NACS is now going to be universally adopted within the United States, the North American charging standard, which every Tesla supercharger has. So every car that has a NACS port or an adapter will be able to charge at Teslas over time. Head of Sony Honda Mobility, Nakanishi-san, says Sony Honda Mobility will be in its element as autonomous driving is realized. It has a strength in entertainment and games. It's a PlayStation on wheels. It's a stream. You can stream. You can do karaoke. And Tesla doesn't have that. Well, Tesla does have some games, but not to the PlayStation extent, right? PlayStation is a king of consoles, right? Demand for mobility diversifies, and there will be a place in the market for AFEELA. Let's hope. I hope AFEELA is successful, but only time will tell. Nakanishi says, for me, launching the product is not the goal. It's just the starting line. The emphasis on software and updates will mark a clear difference from the conventional world in which you sold a car and that was it. Well, Tesla and many other EV automakers have already made it known, and even Hyundai at this point, because their newest refresh of their eGMP are updatable over the air. This is a huge jump for Honda and Japanese automakers to have a living car after you sold it, where you can have software updates. I mean, when I was in Japan to see Honda's new Zero Series, you could download a Type R, Civic Type R audio pack, and it would make the car drive like a Type R, sound like a Type R, to the NSX, to the Honda Jet, and it's an S2000 was even in there. So like, you'll be able to download these things, these software improvements, or should I say software customization, because sometimes they're not an improvement, to make the car more interesting, more fun, and potentially more valuable if you have a new streaming software or service to make your car more appealing. If you just press autonomous mode, lay back, relax, you're watching a movie, you're playing a game, you're singing karaoke. That's what Sony Honda Mobility is hoping to provide. We just don't know when. The car launches soon, but that sort of autonomy and connectivity, it will be fun to see this thing evolve. So I got to shut myself down. I'm excited for it. Stay tuned for my coverage, not only on Sony Honda in January, but definitely a lot of Honda EVs, which is the heart of the Sony Honda Mobility AFEELA vehicles. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and peace out.